Mr. Speaker, sir, while the Workers' Party is supportive of the assistance this bill will provide for the construction, as of now, its impact on the public is at best unclear and at worst could potentially be very significant for some contracting parties. I note that this bill will cover contracts to build residential units, including existing contracts to build HDB BTO flats. Can the Minister confirm how any adjustment in the price of HDB contracts with builders would impact home buyers? Would they be at risk of upward price adjustments? In addition, many public sector projects would also see a hike in construction costs arising from this bill. And in the same vein, I would like to ask Minister what this would amount to and its impact on the government's budget. Separately, has the Ministry considered the impact of the bill on town councils and whether it would be providing assistance to them? Sir, in my discussions with some qualified persons or QPs and consultants over the weekend, it was made known to me that a small number of contractors are citing problems with meeting project deadlines because of COVID-19, while at the same time tendering aggressively and securing contracts for new projects. Earlier this year, Minister at a seminar organized by the PCA and REDAS confirmed that construction contracts for the built environment sector are expected to grow to between 23 billion and 28 billion in 2021. As the sector recovers from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. This was up from the $21.3 billion worth of projects awarded in 2020, even as that figure fell by 10 billion owing to the pandemic. Sir, it would be important to note, I beg your pardon, Madam Deputy Speaker, it would be important to note that the sector comprises of construction companies of varying sizes, from big players to small-time subcontractors, who could all potentially rely on this bill for relief. To that end, it would undermine the purpose of this legislation if some companies, particularly larger ones, cite COVID-19 as a reason for higher foreign manpower costs, resulting in increased costs for contracting parties or even the public, while at the same time deploying foreign manpower to start on new projects, even as their contracts that predate the 1st of October 2020 are allowed to proceed slowly, when they may instead be completed forthwith. So while it could be unrealistic to expect construction companies to throttle back on bidding for new projects in order to rely on the relief legislated by this bill, I hope Minister can acknowledge this point so that assessors under Clause 79E can carefully consider applications for relief made by companies holistically across all the projects undertaken and not just for the specific contract for which relief is sought. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, undoubtedly, the construction industry has borne a significant brunt of the COVID-19 restrictions for the past year, and I support measures to help them cope. However, rewriting a contract price to one that was not initially agreed by the parties is a drastic intervention that must be exercised with utmost care. Thank you.
I'll take this opportunity to address a query by the Leader of the Opposition about the impact of the KOTMA Amendment Bill on BTO prices. Now, the bill, it's important to set the context. The bill tackles or relates to construction contracts before October 2020, so existing contracts. And those BTOs that have already been sold, those are already sold. The prices will not change. Likewise, for new BTO contracts, we do not price HDB BTO to recover construction costs or land costs. Certainly, it will cost more as a whole, but this is not a factor in determining the price that we set for BTO prices. In any event, in order to manage the overall tender prices for both public and private sector, I had mentioned earlier in my speech that the agencies are working with the private sector to work on both public and private construction procurement projects going forward. Because what we've seen during this crisis is that contractors are buffering up for uncertainty because they do not know what twists and turns there are in the road ahead, as many of them had found to their detriment in the last year. And therefore, tender prices as a whole for both public and private sector, we see an increase. And with such a contract in place, if we can reach an agreement, it will enable contractors to be assured that uncertainty will be cost-shared between the client and the contractor. And we hope that will then provide more assurance to contractors as they bid for new contracts, whether it's a BTO project, whether it's a public sector infrastructure project, or whether it's a private sector project. So all in, to put in clauses in our standard contracts to enable there to be some fair cost sharing for uncertainty. Now, I speak broadly. The details will follow as the agencies and our partners reach precise language.
Deputy Speaker, I rise to respond to Minister's question about whether I support bringing in more foreign workers for the construction sector. Earlier on in my speech and earlier on in the day during parliamentary question time, I spoke of opening up more non-traditional source countries. And I even raised the example of Vietnam because the numbers of the infection rate there is very low compared to many other ASEAN countries, although in the last few days I understand the numbers are going up. Still, the rise is in terms of absolute numbers less. So that should give an indication about where I stand on the situation affecting some of these companies. My communication really has been with the small contractors, 3, 4, 5 foreign workers even. And when you lose 1 or 2 foreign workers, a lot of your business, you cannot execute a project. And so for these particular individuals, it is a dire situation. And so it would be grossly unfair then to suddenly pull the rug from under their feet and say, no, we have to stop foreign workers from coming in right now. But overall, I heard what Minister said about the ITMs in particular, the construction ITMs, a longer project, I would say, to wean the sector to be more manpower lean. And I believe at some point, the government will have to present its report card on what its progress has been. And I think that will be helpful also for members of the public to make an assessment as to whether the measures, the amount of money put into the ITMs, specifically the construction ITMs, to improve productivity has borne fruit. But I hope I've answered the Minister's questions.
Mr. Leong Man Wai.